Hi, folks. This is Louis Hertham, the original Peter Abernathy. Hell is empty and all the devils are here on the Shat on TV Westworld Podcast with Roger, Gene, and Big D.
Welcome back to Shat on TV Westworld, the unofficial podcast companion piece of the hit HBO show Westworld. I'm one of your hosts, Dick Ebert, and alongside me is my solo co-host tonight, Kerri Blue Tongue Gross.
Shit, ninjas?
Yeah. And this is the Instacast episode where we look back on this week's episode of Westworld and provide our immediate reactions, thoughts, analysis, feedback immediately after watching it. And the episode was entitled Akane no Mai. So, Kerri, upon first viewing, what are your thoughts on the episode?
I really liked it. I mean, I felt like it left a lot to be discovered, but it was nice to have a break from Bernard. I definitely have been wanting more of Maeve's story, and I thought she was definitely a badass here and kills it this episode, so I was pleased.
Yeah, so this is a milestone episode for us, and probably we've recorded now combined maybe like 140 episodes. This is my first episode ever taking the hosting duties.
You're doing a great job so far. So Gene is actually taking Roger's girlfriend to a wedding tonight, and then Roger's in New York, and he tried to get on, but some technical difficulties. We're just going to do it, you and me, and knock it out of the park.
We're going to go solo here. So yeah, we had a little issue with Roger, so we're recording this a bit late, and hopefully we'll try to burn through this, because this is one of those episodes that I want to go back and watch because I don't want to be too quick. I don't want to be negative. I don't want to, I want to really see if my first take opinion on it, because to me, it felt a bit different. It felt a bit, the scale was smaller than most episodes. And a lot of the shots were very dark. It had a different feel than the rest of the season. Did you share any of those thoughts, or is this only me?
No, I can see how you would think that, because, I mean, it does take place predominantly in Shogun, and so that's a new environment for us with a ton of new characters. And I felt like, they kind of transition between these very action-packed with a lot of revelations, and then kind of slow it down for this more. I think next episode we'll see a lot more action. So.
Yeah, well, again, this is just immediately after the episode has aired, so I haven't had a chance to go on any social media. I'm wondering if the general audience is going to be split. I have a feeling this will be a divisive episode. There's going to be a portion of the audience that loves it, and I think a portion that hates it.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely people, like we were just saying, I think Roger's probably going to freak out because there's ninjas and samurais, and that might appeal to some people that are less into like the deep dive theories that we've been having going on, and just more of like action and visuals. So
one of my other immediate impressions on this episode was how heavy they were with the theme of mirroring. They recreate essentially the entire second robbery of the Mariposa. In Westworld, they do even, a Japanese-inspired version of Paint It Black, down to the sheriff getting, killed on his horse. It's a clear parallel to show us that what's been going on, not only theme-wise within Westworld, is going on here, but we even get to see a mirroring of the two different armistice. The Japanese Shogun version with the dragon tattoo, our Westworld version with the snake tattoo. To me, went a little bit over the top. I understand they're showing us the parallels between the parks, the characters, but did you think they went a little bit overboard, or did you even have a problem with it?
I enjoyed it. I think, Sizemore explains that Shogun was for Westworld guests that thought it was too tame. There's a lot more violence here. And then he also explains that, how is he expected to have recreating 300 new narratives? He does reuse a lot of things. He even calls them the doppelbots, which I thought was funny. But I think what it did for the hosts was it confirms for them that, on top of the abuse that they've been experiencing, that even their own stories and their own narratives aren't their own, that, it's almost more insulting. And I think it shows Maeve's empathy. And that's something that, we've discussed that like makes hosts become sentient is when they have empathy for other people. And she even states that, that she's not supposed to love anybody but herself. So I think by her seeing her reflection in these other hosts is awakening for her even more so.
Okay, so from our first impressions, let's go into, I think we'll do for this Instacast, we'll do a big bucket of things we learned and then some topics that we want to delve into deeper in tomorrow's deep dive. So what was some of the things that we learned? What was your big number one takeaway from the episode?
For me, we were always wondering what the Valley Beyond was. And I think they kind of revealed to us that the Valley Beyond is actually the large body of water where the hosts are. And then we kind of figure out what happened to all the hosts that were floating in the water there. So, that was a little bit of a revelation for me.
So yeah, we find out that they're starting to drain the valley. They're skimming the bodies of the hosts off. They're pulling them back in and starting to, pull out the control units. But the big revelation in there is that we learn that a third of the hosts have virgin control units, never had data, and they've been swapped out. So I take this to mean a third of the hosts that were pulled out of the water were originally, like we see Teddy in there, right? So Teddy, he's in the water, but his control unit has been pulled out, put into another host body, and it was replaced with a virgin control unit. So that's why the tech is surprised. Hey, these are blank. They shouldn't be blank. I took it as that means a third of those hosts that we see dead floating in the water have been loaded into fresh new shells, and they're running around the park. So Bernard might not be the only body that could be swapped out right now.
Yeah, I was a little foggy on that, and you had clarified, that I was saying, well, how would these hosts have gotten, blank CPUs? And then, we see that they did burn the cradle where all that information's held. They could have, stolen or, replaced these, the third of the hosts with these blank CPUs. So I was wondering if it was that they had just been wiped, but no, if they'd never contained data at all, then where are those host CPUs and which, are they in other host bodies? Are they being stored somewhere? So I'm looking forward to seeing who's who now. It might confirm some of our theories of bodies swapping.
It has to, and that only works if the hosts go back into the cradle, which is the backup data center for all the control units. So the hosts, they swap out 1/3 of the control units, then they go to the backups, and they destroy the whole center, it looks like. Then I think Strand makes the comment, did we really lose a third of our IP in this fire? So am I reading that correct? That the IP isn't the software, isn't the program that runs the hosts, but they consider the IP each of the hosts' individual backed up experiences.
Yeah, like all the data. And it could be also, data they've collected from guests being there too. They don't really clarify that for us, but it seems that in this moment, they realize how big the loss is for them and kind of the situation that they're facing. So yeah, I'm excited to see how that plays out. I think another thing that we've been discussing in the last few episodes is what is Dolores's reasoning for wanting to go to Sweetwater. And we see pretty early on in this episode that she's trying to get to Sweetwater for the train, which is what Abernathy keeps saying in the last two episodes, that he needs to get to the train, get to the train, get to the train. So they finally make it to Sweetwater this episode.
Well, I was always reading that get to the train was his narrative, that he was supposed to load the train to get out of the park with the other guests. So you think possibly get to the train is also, she's banking on him maybe getting confused and thinking that the train in Sweetwater was the train he had to get to?
Yeah, I think so. When Teddy keeps asking her why she needs to go back home, why she needs to get to Sweetwater, she says, because they have my father. I need to get to my father. And then she also needs to get to the train. So I don't think it's just coincidence that he, is repeatedly saying that. I think it might be the most basic thing left in his brain that he's trying to remember.
I took it as more she wanted to go back to Sweetwater also to try to jog Teddy's memory. There's an intimate scene later on in the episode where it's almost as if it's a final test for Dolores. She wants to see whether Teddy can survive in this new world, and he inevitably fails it. I felt it was going back to the roots to try to see if she could jog something loose in him and get him. But it could very well be as simple, your idea about the train, but she is stripping the train down. She's having the tech and the horde repair the train and strip it down to bare bones. Am I the only one who had a flashback to Back to the Future 3? Where Doc Brown and Marty, they're going to start stuffing the numbered logs into it, and they're going to try to, jump the gorge, the Clint Eastwood gorge, and get back to Hill Valley.
I know when I messaged you, I was like, where does she think she's going on this train? You're like, Back to the Future. I'm like, get the fuck out of here.
Because why? What do you have to strip the train down? You're going to try to hit some speed, or are they going to use it to load it up?
They've got to be loading stuff up on it.
What if they're going to load some nitro or some kind of explosive and try to drive it straight into the tunnel, into the mesa? They want to blow the entire mesa up.
Well, because they did say, I believe it was in the last episode, that, that tunnel is valuable for the QA getting in and out and their escape. So if that's what she's planning to do, I can see that playing out. So
another constant theme that runs through all the episodes of Westworld has been the music. And in this episode, again, I have to go back and rewatch it because there was at least 3 or 4. We had Paint It Black, Rolling Stones. And then there was another one you picked up.
Oh, yeah. The Wu-Tang Clan's Cream, Cash Rules Everything Around Me on the last scene. Spoiler alert, when Akane just fucking the most, brutal decapitation of Shogun. And again, it just mirrors Maeve being a badass, that Akane's character reflects that as well.
Yeah, she didn't. Was it a knife? Was it one of her, a dagger that was held in her hair? What was that?
Yeah, I mean, she had all the, sticks in her bun, but I think that was definitely a dagger. And I can tell you, as someone that sits in on a lot of surgeries, it's pretty hard to saw someone in half that way. And a mother's revenge. Yeah,
she opened that thing up like a pineapple. She was just shredding it. But we now shifted over to Shogun World, which we now officially know it is Shogun World. It's not Samurai World. And we learned that this park was designed for guests that found Westworld a bit too tame. It was based on the Edo period, which was between 1603 and 1868 in Japanese history. It was when the shoguns ruled. The period was categorized by economic growth, strict social order, isolationist foreign policies, and a stable population, and also no wars. So this was a time of peace, and the population enjoyed an elevated level of arts and culture. So it's interesting that a more violent version of Westworld is based on what seems like a fairly peaceful period of Japanese history.
Yeah, I mean, I messaged you trying to figure out how far in you'd gotten, and I was like, Shogun is fucking terrifying, because already there's a lot of violence in Westworld. And so if Sizemore's saying, like, this is Westworld, but on steroids, and there's ninjas and samurais, and yeah, I was like, oh shit, this is going to be bad. It's going to go down bad.
Yeah, and we've always debated how the tech within Westworld works. How do the munitions and the guns work to identify host from guest? How do you keep someone safe? It's okay. We can talk about simunitions identifying a human host and reducing, the explosive powder, the charge, the gunpowder, so it doesn't have the full impact. How do you make a human host safe? Katana.
I mean, I was thinking the same thing. I was like, okay, they just expanded the array of weapons here, that I feel like the guest that came to Shogun must have had to sign a longer waiver of, responsibility walking into this. But I mean, Sizemore even says these samurais are off script. So he's also assuming that shit is going down in Shogun as well. I don't know if they're sentient as, some of the Westworld hosts are, but they're clearly off script. And you could see later in the episode that they were walking through the forest, and you see the QA members like pinned to the trees. So Sizemore's like, well, that was our help, so we're fucked. But did you what was with the wicker cages around their heads? Did you catch that?
Yeah, I felt like it was Willow. That was what they did. It was almost
Nicolas Cage.
No, Nicolas Cage. No,
Wickerman.
No, it's Val Kilmer. It was wizards. It was a curse. It was saving a child. There was a bunch of halflings and brownies.
It's also the worst movie rated on our Shat the Movies listing, right?
It is. But no, this was not a different kind of torture. But I just thought of something as we were talking. How they said Shogun World was for a guest that found Westworld too tame. Maybe it wasn't that the narratives and the stories were more violent, but it was an elevated level of danger. That because there were bladed weapons, there were arrows, that it wasn't a more violent tale, but it was a place where you were more likely to get hurt, maimed, that it was a more dangerous environment for the guests, not so much the story and the hosts.
Yeah, because a lot of the story narratives were identical to Westworld, but then you look over the mountain and there's an army of, samurai fighters, and that wasn't really paralleled in Westworld. So I just think it was like the physical violence was more appealing for some people that wanted a more sick setting.
Yeah, people who like danger. I mean, it's, you could go bungee jumping at your local amusement park or go to New Zealand and jump from a gorge. It's a more dangerous level. I think another big revelation in the episode is how Maeve's controls have worked, and we questioned why Ghost Nation didn't respond to her orders to stand down earlier on. And we got an answer in this episode where Maeve attempts again to control a couple of the hosts, and she learns from Sizemore that you're speaking the wrong language, that all of the hosts are inherently or consciously fluent in was it dozens of languages? How many did you say?
I thought he said 7, but it was at least multiple languages. But I guess he was also implying that since they're like, maybe since the cradle was damaged, that they're not all online with each other anymore, so that she would need to speak to them in their language in order to command them.
Yeah, and what I found odd was in the opening scene where they encounter the character that we learn who used to be the commander of one of the Shogun units. She in English says, leave us alone. Free my friends. He doesn't respond and immediately follow her orders, but he knows enough to have her gagged.
Yeah.
How did he understand that, even though he didn't necessarily, he could sense the danger?
Maybe it's how, some of the hosts in Westworld aren't sentient yet. Maybe, since if he's left Shogun's command and Shogun's men are sentient, then they're not responsive to her unless she's speaking in their language. Maybe this guy, because he said, they should be hearing my English and responding to English. For as far as the guests go, like the guests aren't going to know Japanese. So if the guests are speaking English, then they should respond in English. So maybe that's why he understood. But it did make me think, because he said later, something about witchcraft, that they thought, not that she was in control of them, but that she was a witch. So I'm not sure that they understood really what was going on either.
Well, we learn later in the episode when the ninjas attack that Maeve, in an instant of need where she's about to get choked out, because she can't vocalize a command to the one ninja who's choking her out, she gets him to impale himself, to headbutt, looked like it was either a coat. Was it a coat rack or was it
it looked like a dagger.
It was something that was stuck in one of the posts. She gets him to headbutt it. Another one of the ninjas sees it. He runs off. And I think that's where the rumor of her being a witch was, that she non-verbally got one of his fellow assassins to commit suicide.
Yeah. And you can see the shock and terror in Sizemore's face, where he's like, this has now gone beyond anything he could have ever imagined. She now is able to non-verbally control and command all of the hosts. And, she refers to it as her new voice. And I'm excited because this seems like a very extremely powerful weapon. And I'm also curious, the dichotomy between her and Dolores and their different agendas, that I feel like this will play out in her possibly being able to control Dolores or overtake Dolores's agenda as well.
Yeah, this new voice that Maeve has finally mastered is a power that we've only seen wielded by Dr. Ford. Mm-hmm. He wielded it when he was having lunch with Teresa in the restaurant before they destroyed it with the large earth mover, and he froze all of the workers in the field and all of the staff. So the fact that Maeve is somehow on her own elevated to a level of control that only the park creator demonstrated, I think is a big growth moment for her. And it's elevated her. If we're thinking Dolores and Maeve are kind of both on a path of freedom and have control, she's now clearly ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I've been struggling a little bit the last this second season, wondering if Dolores is truly off narrative or if she's just on a new narrative, that is now Wyatt, which the goal is still to, overthrow the park. I'm on and off on that. I'm definitely 100% believing that Maeve is no longer on narrative and has complete free will. And now in addition to that, she has this incredible gift. So yeah, this was truly her episode.
So now, like you said, shifting back to Dolores, the final scene of Dolores back in Sweetwater with Teddy. And I texted you, I said, is this the first time we've seen like romantic, sweet robot love? Like there were this, I felt like it was like I was waiting for Katherine Heigl to come in. It was going to be some romantic love scene with Teddy's like sweaty, muscular back. They're caressing each other. What did you think of this final lovemaking? And then the scene we see later where Teddy is ambushed.
This scene did nothing for me. When you were like, yeah, this is, the first robot lovemaking, I'm like, Hector and Maeve, that is like the lustful, like we're end of the world. Let's get it on. Hot sex. And then this was like, wah, wah. This is like daytime soap opera.
This was PG.
Yeah.
I want to pleasure you.
And maybe that was her true test for Teddy. And she's like, I'll wipe your brain and move on to some, maybe Hector's available later.
Yeah, compared to Hector and Teddy, I think Teddy is the safe bet. He's the minivan driving, stay-at-home dad, soccer dad. And then Hector is that hot stud, maybe yoga teacher. He's much more exciting than Teddy.
He rides a motorcycle.
Oh, definitely badass dude. But that final scene, Dolores has said, yes, what we have is real, but you won't survive in this new world. She calls in the tech that they had kept with them since, I think it was the raid on, I think it was Sector 19, the outpost. What did you get from this scene? What do you think they're doing to Teddy?
Well, I thought at first glance that what they were doing was wiping him, but that doesn't seem like it would benefit her at all. And her whole speech, with the analogy with the cows that her father and the flies, and he had to burn the weak ones so the others would survive. It seems like what she would need to do would like amp up his either awareness or his aggression, and I think what she's been trying to do this whole season is allow him to find it himself, awaken himself, because she had all of the, what are they? The Confederados. She just verbally had all of them. She tried to tell them, they refused to, and the programmer just programmed them. She didn't give them any free will to do it. So I think this whole time she's been trying to get Teddy to just come to this awakening himself, probably because she does love him. But she does say, I've seen you clearly, and I see you're not going to make it. There's a swarm coming, and if we're going to survive, some of us are going to have to burn, and to grow, we all need to suffer. And so she then has him reprogrammed against his will, which is exactly what Ford and Delos have been doing to these hosts all along. But I guess she's taking it as like a sacrifice for her greater goal.
Yeah, and the sad thing is she in 1 second affirms her affection for Teddy, but then goes forward even against the warnings of the tech. The tech said, I can't make this large of a change in his personality without a full reboot. This could cause him to crash. So that Dolores is willing to risk Teddy, as she knows him, to elevate possibly his aggression, it's a definite change in her character that she's willing to do what it takes to survive and to advance, regardless of her personal feelings. She's starting to separate those two. So I think this puts us, we're at some 20 minutes. I think we have some ideas of just the stuff we learned. And I think we want to shut this down and kind of think about what we're going to cover in the deep dive. Are there any questions that you want to, that this episode left you really pondering that you want to investigate a bit more for the deep dive?
I think one thing is definitely trying to figure out what Teddy's role is going to be in the future. I mean, we see his body being pulled from the water, and then we see it laying in the room when they're talking about how all the CPUs have been virgin. So, what happened to Teddy's, CPU, his consciousness? And also, what is she planning to do with this train? Is it going to be used as a weapon? Are they trying to escape? Are they going to the Mesa? I don't know.
Yeah, for me, I want to go and delve back into the story that Dolores tells of the blue tongue plague and how her father had dealt with it, that it wasn't spread cow to cow, that it was spread by the flies, because that's a clear analogy for what's going on in the park. They've always represented the fly on the hosts as almost the virus of free will that was spreading through them. And she's obviously employing what her father had taught her. You pile up the cows, you burn them, the flies hate the smoke, and that's required for the rest of the herd to survive. So I think what she's doing here could be a very similar trick in piling up the host into the valley and almost a large mass suicide, but then distracting them with replacing a third of them. So that could be her big plan. I want to look into that a bit more. And then also look into the body swapping, because in the 1 second they're talking about the third being virgin control units. Teddy's laying on top of the pile in the body shop. It looks up to Bernard standing very frozen, fixated on the pile and Teddy. And I hope it doesn't turn out to be that Teddy is in Bernard, because it was so heavy. It was clearly that they were saying, this is not Bernard's normal action. It was almost as if they were saying, yes, this is Teddy looking down on himself, dead.
Well, and, when Bernard and the QA stumble upon all the bodies floating in the water, Bernard says, I did this. And if at the time it was Teddy's CPU saying that, then Teddy did this as a higher awareness or aggression programmed from the programmer. I don't know. I am interested, definitely. It was kind of a slow moving, even though there was a lot of action and violence, but I feel exactly that it's intentional and that we're going to have a lot of revelations the next episode.
Yeah, so I think that's a good, roughly 25 minutes of an Instacast. So I think we'll close up shop here, start researching, go watch it a second time. So let's have that conclude this week's episode of Shat on TV Instacast. Be sure to follow us on social media, share with a friend. We're on Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, all under @ShatOnTVs. Facebook, search for Shat on TV's podcast. Email us at hosts@shatontv.com. Website is shatontv.com as well. We're everywhere fine podcasts can be found, including iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, YouTube, iHeartRadio, Spotify. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review. It helps the podcast grow. Also, if you want to check out some other stuff that we do over on shatthemovies.com, where we cover 80s and 90s movies. And also this week, we should be airing an interview that we had with Louis Hertham, Peter Abernathy. We gave a little preview of it last week. He was kind enough to sit down with Roger and Gene for, I think, like an hour and 20 minutes. So that's supposed to be released this week, so you can look forward to that. So on behalf of my co-host, Kerri Gross, I am Dick Ebert. Be sure to join us for our next podcast on Tuesday night, which will be the deep dive of episode 5, Westworld. Have a good evening, and join us on Tuesday at the Mesa. Good night.
Good night.